Salutations and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Kidology and I make videos about everything and anything to do with modern society. And I do mean anything because this is a rant video. This is a pure-blooded rant video. I've been in a bad place this year, so I have missed out on a lot. But one thing I really was surprised to have missed out on was Armie Hammer's Weasley attempt at a comeback, which is apparently still underway. And ladies and gentlefolk, I clearly have to make this video quickly because some of y'all are falling for it. Too many of you, too many people on the internet are falling for this pretty boy act. And I am here to nip that in the bud because this is unacceptable. Unacceptable. This man is a comedic genius. That is all we can consider him as at this point. He cannot be considered as a cultured thespian. He cannot be considered as a man who has been wrongfully scorned by the masses. No. We need to remember what he did. We need to remember why people do not like him. We need to remember why he cancelled himself. Remember, nobody can be cancelled. People cancel themselves. They leave on their own because they know. I mean, maybe there's one or two exceptions, but overwhelmingly, people cancel themselves, and Armie is the perfect example, the example par excellence of somebody who cancelled himself. And we must respect that. We must respect that because he has learned nothing. He has learned absolutely nothing. And I'm here to set the record straight because, as I said, some of you are falling for it. It seems clear this guy was an intoxicated dom. Well, very convenient of you to bring that up because if for some reason something goes wrong and my wife finds out, I will probably remove your head from your body. Drove woman wild. I need your blood. I crave it. Will you give it to me tomorrow? Don't forget that you're mine. That topic, once again, it is very intense. I'm intense. I need your blood. I want you to feed me with it. Bringing their fantasies to life. If I wanted to cut off one of your toes and keep it with me in my pocket, so I always had a piece of you in my possession. Naturally, they didn't like being discarded when the cad moved on. You're my angel. You're made to save me. You're mine. You hear me? Say it now. Say that you're mine. Mine. M-I-N. So they did what scorned women have done for millennia. I need to touch every part of you inside and out. That's it. Toys are all well and good, but I want to consume every part of you. I want to buy pieces off of you. First of all, how drunk are you? Scale of 1 to 5, 2.9. The end. So aroused, thinking of holding your heart in my hand and controlling when it beats. I am 100% a cannibal. I want to eat you. Damn, that's scary to admit, but I've never admitted that before. I've cut the heart out of a living animal before and eaten it while still warm. I think now is the appropriate time to say the end. And don't get me wrong, I am all about redemption. People changing their ways and taking genuine accountability for what they have done. We all have to go through an instance or incident in our lives where we have to come to terms with being wrong, with doing wrong, and we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and face ourselves. However, it is clear to me that when Armie Hammer looks into a mirror, it is simply to gel back his hair, to give himself a wink or a look, and to mouth to himself, Armie, I want to eat you, because this man has learned absolutely nothing. In fact, I would allegedly, because I do not want to be sued by Cayman Island money. All he's probably learned is how very fortunate he is to have mommy paying for good PR. It is so very interesting to me how his comeback has correlated seamlessly, perfectly, with mommy publishing her new tell-all memoir titled Hammered. And this entire memoir is basically trying to sanitize the image of her golden boy.
God is faithful. He will never fail us. People can fail us. Our family was dragged through the mud, and I really admire my son, Armie, because during it, he really stayed quiet. Let God defend you. And we just made a pact, all of us, that we were going to remain silent, because you never ever think you're going to read in the papers that your son's a cannibal, for example. And I'm like, are there any limbs missing anywhere out there? I mean, it's just so crazy. But yet amongst that, God is so faithful, and he brought our family completely back together, and it's really beautiful.
So a brief recap of the Armie Hammer scandal of the 2020s, since mommy and Armie are not going to do it for us. Armand Douglas Hammer is an actor. He's not a good actor. He's not a bad actor. He's basically just a pretty face. And if you put that pretty face into an indie film with a brilliant director, an amazing up-and-coming teen heartthrob, and an aesthetically filmed Italian villa, then you get a career lifeline. Call Me By Your Name is what, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many a film critic, saved Armie Hammer from being the hot equivalent of a later career Jack Black. It transformed him from a mediocre actor who was simply getting roles because he was smoking hot into a thespian who just happened to be smoking hot. If you've watched the Disney remake of The Lone Ranger, that pretty much sums up his acting abilities. And that is all you need to know about his acting career. So in short, his acting can be described as what bitter men on Twitter describe Margot Robbie as being: mid. And don't get me wrong, it is completely fine to be a not so very good actor who simply gets roles because of how you look. That is pretty much a good 60 to 65% of Hollywood. My issue is that, at least based on interviews and Armie's reflections on his career, he does tend to think that he is a far better actor than he actually is, or than his portfolio would suggest. He really does seem to take himself a little bit too seriously. And this is really important to his comeback, and in my opinion, his ego not being able to take being irrelevant for very much longer.
I have also written a script with a good friend of mine that is pretty autobiographical and direct.
It's about you.
Together. In a roundabout way, yeah.
Oh yeah, he is doing a Jussie Smollett, for sure. Writing and starring in a film all about him in order to vindicate himself, in order to be relevant. They all do it. They all do it because they cannot help it. But what is important is what our little Prince Charming was getting up to in the DMs and in his everyday life, whilst he was married to a beautiful, successful woman and had two equally beautiful children who were seemingly his priority. January 2021 is a very busy month for Armie. This is a month that defines all months. Graphic and very explicit texts are published by one of his exes, which results in more exes coming forward detailing their controlling, emotionally, and allegedly physically abusive relationships with him whilst he was still married. And according to him, he was having affairs like this whilst he was married with some 50 to 100, maybe even 200 women. Hey, who knows? Who keeps count of these sorts of things, right? Now, he'd basically start by getting to know and subsequently love bombing these very conventionally beautiful, vanilla, emphasis on the vanilla woman on Instagram. Mind you, he was married with 2 children at this time. And all of these women have the same kind of story. He'd follow them on Instagram. He was so goofy and considerate, and he'd talk to them for hours on the phone. And of course, he looked like Prince frickin' Charming. And he'd give the same sorry sob story about him and his wife basically being separated, and therefore it wasn't actually infidelity, it wasn't actually an affair, it wasn't actually cheating, it wasn't actually bad, nothing is ever his fault, he's a good guy, nothing's actually. He then, according to some of them, become controlling and express his interest in a BDSM-style relationship and kink. He was especially fond of ropes and the Japanese rope bondage of shibari. Keep a tab on that. Now, there's nothing wrong with having kinks, there's nothing wrong with having fantasies, but there is something wrong in expressing those kinks and those fantasies to people who you have a clear power imbalance over. To people who are already prone to idealizing you and will do anything for you. And mind you, the vast majority of these women were in their early 20s. You know, the kind of women who are in the age bracket of Leonardo DiCaprio's interests. And I think this imbalance is most telling when you just look at some of the message exchanges. The women hardly ever respond to his texts, and when they do, it's usually in like confusion or just the sort of, that's so interesting, yes, daddy kind of way. The women hardly ever respond with as much enthusiasm as him, and he just continues to write diatribes without in any way considering what they are actually saying, what they are writing. It is very clear that this is all about him. It very much does feel like these women fell into the gratitude trap. This good-looking multi-millionaire actor is interested in me, a nobody. So therefore, I should be grateful and I should be accepting of his ways. Something that I've noticed online and during his comeback is that a lot of people seem to be under the impression that he was shunned by Hollywood and cancelled online because he was presented as being, I don't know, Jeffrey Dahmer adjacent. He most definitely wasn't shunned for being a cannibal. Most people can recognize that this was very much in line with being his personal kink. And I also really don't think he was shunned for cheating on his wife and children. I think the main reason why he was quote unquote cancelled as he calls it, is because of the way in which he cheated on his wife and his children, as well as the way in which he expressed and explored his cannibalistic fetishizations. He involved multiple women, all of whom were in their early 20s and who were very clearly, just based on their profiles, vanilla, and therefore created a clear power imbalance that was made even worse by the inclusion of his fetish. And this was all during what was still quite a prominent discussion around #MeToo, especially after accusations of him a woman back in 2017 for over 4 hours came to light. And once again, keep a tab on that. Now, for all the people who are online at the moment and think that he was wrongfully accused, that he is a redeemed man, that he is a good man, that somebody as hot as him could never do the things that people were accusing him of, believe you me, I have seen enough of those comments. I think it's important to note a few things. Considering he has admitted to having affairs with 50 to 100 to maybe even 200 women, it is statistically impossible that all the women he had affairs and relations with, whether consensually or allegedly not, just happened to all be into a cannibalistic kink, into a BDSM lifestyle, or more importantly, enthusiastic and well-versed practitioners of BDSM. Statistically impossible. Whilst maintaining that he had done nothing criminal in February, Mr. Hammer told Airmail, a digital newsletter, that he was 1,000,000% certain that he had been emotionally abusive to his accusers. Armie Hammer admits he scraped his initials into ex-girlfriend Paige Lorenz's groin with a knife.
I would basically take a little tiny point and just kind of trace the letter A.
What do you mean a point? What do you mean?
Just like the tip of a small knife.
A knife?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you not ashamed of yourself? Are you not embarrassed? This is really embarrassing.
In 2013, he did an interview with Playboy, which has surprisingly been completely scrubbed from the internet. But this is what Armie had to say. I don't know how much we can put here without my parents being embarrassed, but I used to like to be a dominant lover. Sorry, mom and dad. I like the grabbing of the neck and the hair and all that. But then you get married and your sexual appetites change. And I mean that for the better. It's not like I'm suffering in any way, but you can't really pull your wife's hair. It gets to a point where you say, I respect you too much to do these things that I kind of want to. Just a heads up that a true practitioner of BDSM has respect for all of their partners, whether they are their wives or not. I think a key issue that Armie faces, both then and now, is a lack of education in BDSM whilst professing to be a connoisseur. If he'd just gotten on his phone and not headed over to, I don't know, the hub, and instead headed over to Beducated and oh look, he could have just clicked on the category tab and found an entire library's worth of educational content made by professionals. But no, he didn't, but you can. Now, I'm quite sure that by now you know how much I love Beducated, not just because of how much it has helped me in my personal life, but also because of how important I think sex ed is for us in our day and age. Beducated is the world's top sex ed platform and resource, offering you over 100 courses, irrespective of your relationship status, your sexual orientation, or your gender. And it perfectly and uniquely brings together what can only be described as toe-curling pleasure and expert-backed sex ed. And these are all accessible through video tutorials, through practical exercises, and reliable information that has all been curated by some of the world's top experts in their fields. And it is so sad that a mere 40% of people are actually happy with their sex lives. And that is why I think Beducated is ideal for modern couples and people in relationships. There is what I can really only describe as a literal treasure trove of content for you and your particular coupled relationship situation. And I mean that. There are even courses for the Armie Hammers of the world and how to actually get to grips with making the right decisions, not just for you, but importantly for others. A whole, detailed, extensive, and clearly very important course. Armie, are you there? And I really appreciate these courses for folks in relationships, just because there are so many things that, especially once you get into a relationship, are considered taboo to talk about or to even acknowledge, even with your partner. And these courses really open up the avenues to communicate together. And like I said, I really appreciate these courses. I'm terrible at communicating, even just in my personal life. I especially enjoyed a newly added course by Brave and One. Man, I spend too much time on this app when I can recognize the newly added courses. And this course is all about how to master communication. It is possible for us to create deeper, more meaningful communication with our partners, especially when you're in a long-term relationship and maybe don't check in on your partner's needs, on how their body's changing, on how their needs are changing, on how their hormones are changing, or just being able to talk openly and vulnerably about intimacy together. And it is seriously courses like these that give me so much hope. It really gives me hope when I think that there is none when it comes to relationships, when it comes to relationships sustaining themselves, when it comes to relationships transforming from short-term to long-term relationships. And it just, as I said, gives me so much joy that these courses are available, that we are actually able to have these conversations and that people are having these conversations. So if you want to become more confident in the bedroom, if you want to master something new or try a new and exciting technique, or you're just looking to enjoy sex and your sexuality more, then use code Kidology to get an incredible, invaluable 40% off your Beducated yearly pass. And my cup of love for Beducated just keeps overflowing because this deal gets even better. It is completely risk-free. Not only can you try Bedukated's 24-hour free trial with full access to all their resources, you also get a 14-day money-back guarantee. You have absolutely nothing to lose. Thank you so very much to Beducated for sponsoring this video, and thank you for helping me, and I'm sure so very many of you, on your sexual wellness journeys. And you know how I'm incredibly grateful for Beducated being a part of my life? Well, Armie Hammer is expressing a lot of gratitude at the moment, but for very different reasons. What I've noticed during my short time on this earth is that a lot of people who have very little remorse for what they've done will often express gratitude when the truth of what they have done is finally brought to light, when their facade is exposed.
You literally see it as a blessing in disguise?
1,000,000%.
Just like when Armie expressed gratitude to the DA for conducting a thorough investigation and coming to the conclusion that I have stood by this entire time, that no crime was committed. Yeah, just a lifetime's worth of trauma. I look forward to beginning what will be a long, difficult process of putting my life back together now that my name is cleared. I always love it when self-professed abusers forgive themselves, especially when the people that they've abused have not. I think it's fascinating what this has all been spun into relative to what the DA actually said. In a statement, the DA office said it could not prove allegations beyond a reasonable doubt, in part due to the, quote, complexity of the relationship between Hammer and the accuser. And I think this is very important to note, irrespective of what Armie, PR, and his mommy are trying to spin it into. Firstly, most rape and sexual cases don't lead to a conviction due to a lack of sufficient evidence. And this is even more so the case when phones and social media are involved, due to the extent of evidence that needs to be considered. In fact, what is heartbreaking and very concerning is that year on year, more and more victims are choosing to withdraw support for their cases. In the UK, 57% of victims withdraw support for their cases, mainly due to how long and probing it was. In the US, a mere 25 out of 1,000 perpetrators are convicted of their crimes. Now, I'm not saying that he's guilty, but I am most definitely not saying that he's innocent, especially when we consider how seriously modern societies take rape and sexual assault against women and men. Now, let's check in on Armie's comeback and how well the gratitude journey is going. Because as history has shown, the best way of putting your life back together is going on to Piers Morgan and indirectly implying that your ex-wife was responsible for your infidelities and gross behavior.
For the first 7 years of my marriage, which, included, a year of engagement and all that stuff, I was monogamous. I was faithful. I didn't cheat on my wife.
What made you finally cheat?
This is how I got coached by one of my teachers for my Oxbridge interview. When they ask you a question, sit, think, nod, and then answer. Typical PR engagement. He's not thinking about anything. He's got this all planned. This is exactly what he was going to say. It's brilliant.
I think that I got to a point where I I want to answer this really carefully.
That's the kind of question you don't even need to think. I cheated because I wanted to, because I wanted to get my noodle wet. Literally, that is all it is. The road of infidelity is so clear. There are no obstacles. There's no scenic route. It is just there. I just wanted to.
I think what happens in long-term relationships are the two people will grow constantly. And if the people start to grow apart, at first it's minuscule, it's unrecognizable, and it's like a tanker ship going on the open sea. If they're off by 1 degree for the first mile, you probably don't notice. 5 miles, you're a little bit offshore. But you go 500 miles or 1,000 miles, you lose sight of each other and you're in a fog bank. And all of a sudden, when you're lost and you've lost your partner because you're not checking in with each other, which is a two-way street, you can't find that person again. And I think that's what finally happened in my marriage. I think you have two people who grow, which everyone will do, but they weren't growing necessarily together.
Why did you cheat? Because you have two people who grow apart, who don't grow together. There is not a pinch of introspection in that answer. Not a pinch.
From that first moment that you took the decision to be unfaithful, again, I
His face. That is the face of somebody realizing that their PR script has failed. And he's the typical example of somebody who's in the first stages of therapy and uses therapy language in everything, in all their communication. So now he's going to give a therapy response. I'm quite sure that what he's going to say is that now it's all his fault, or it was just me. I was the one. Like, I made that decision. I'm the bad guy. You watch. I know he's going to say that. He's going to say that at some point.
A few moments later.
I had an affair on my wife. Obviously, I'm not the first person in the history of Hollywood to do that, but I did it. And it's less than becoming behavior that I have to own and take accountability for.
There it is.
Again, I'll ask the question, not because I want to be prurient. I'm just curious about how bad this problem got for you. How many women were there from that point?
Probably more than the average person would be exposed to.
Give me a ballpark.
I would say, I haven't done the math.
50? 50, 100, 200, 500?
Sure. Maybe not 500. That's quite a bit. But
many hundreds.
I wouldn't say many hundreds, no.
A lot of introspection happened in the last few years. Clearly, he can't remember. It's just like, I don't know, 50, 100.
What do you feel about that now? Just on that point, never mind the allegations, which we'll come to, but what do you feel about how you were behaving?
Sure, if I look at it as it pertains to me, I look at a guy who was really hurting and needed something and didn't have it within himself to give himself what he needed. So he was looking for that love or acceptance from other people. And that's...
he's writing a script about his life, right? He's writing something about his life. This is a guy who's writing about his life. This is a guy who sees his life as like an odyssey.
If I look at it in relation to the other people, I look at a bunch of people who were used like a drug.
Do you know what people also do with drugs? They abuse them. Just putting it out there. I find this so peculiar. I mean, he's had a lifetime of not being in touch with himself, of feeling like an imposter, an outsider, the anti-hero. I therefore cannot believe that this guy, in a mere few years, has discovered his truly authentic, introspective self that he allegedly hasn't had access to for the past 38 years. Now, there's something that he's been doing in all of these interviews that he's been giving on all these fringe alternative media channels, which is what can be summed up as the ocean story. And this is a story about how he tried to unalive himself and how he walked out or swam out into the ocean in order to do this.
There was a time where I was standing on the shore and I just looked out at the ocean and I thought, yep, this is it. And I just swam out really far. And I just swam out into the ocean a long way. We were down in the Cayman Islands, so I swam out a long way. But then as I was out there in the ocean, I thought about my kids.
And of course, I empathize entirely with anybody who's had thoughts like this or has done this. But I think it's very interesting why this story comes up. And also the fact that the DMs show that he told one of how does he call them? Just one of the drugs, because obviously they're not real people or real women. He told one of them the story so that she would feel sorry for him, so that she would empathize with him, so that she would fall for the pretty boy act. All the way back in 2020, he told this woman, I appreciate you being so empathetic and caring so much. It feels really nice to know you care, but I promise you, I am not in that place anymore. I've been working really hard with my therapist and a psychiatrist and have it all under control. Armie, I cannot take you seriously because you take yourself too seriously. Everything that you see celebrities doing when they go on their media tours, whether it's for a film, whether it's for their own lifestyle brand, whether it's to regain public trust, whether it's to rekindle their fledgling acting career, there is an entire PR team behind this. Whether it be an actual agency or just mummy, they are there and they are depending on people not doing their research. They are depending on people not looking into what actually happened. They are depending on the passage of time that people will forget about what actually happened. And then a new narrative can be formed. A new narrative can be spewed for over an hour on Piers Morgan Uncensored. They can cry at the right times. They can open their big, wide, blue eyes full of tears and moisture that you just want to hug them. You just want to believe that there's absolutely no way that somebody that looks like this could do any of this. He's an actor. He is just an actor. That is all he is. And this is some very effective PR-led acting. And mind you, this is because Armie said that this ocean story happened after he got exposed, after he lost everything, in his own words. I mean, I love it how he says that he's lost everything when he actually has full access to his kids. He's a co-parent and apparently his children are his priority. You've lost everything, but you haven't. But yet you want me to believe that you've lost everything and your kids are your priority and are the only thing that matter to you and you have full access to them. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I am not buying it.
A third woman came forward a week after this, January 25th, Paige Lorenzi, who's a 24-year-old who claimed that you'd had a relationship for 4 months in 2020. She corroborated some of the other stories. She told Page 6 again that Hammer, you, allegedly branded her pelvis with the letter A, bruised her, coerced her, took graphic photographs of her without her consent. It's a strange thing to do to somebody, isn't it? To use a knife to brand them with presumably your initial for your name.
Yes, I think to some it probably sounds really strange. To some it probably sounds like a very romantic gesture.
I don't even remember Christian Grey in 50 Shades doing that.
Sure. I mean, but if we look at Christian Grey, there's a lot of gray in that situation that if you
Another perfect example of good PR. You turn everything into an analogy, everything into a metaphor, everything into a story. But I love how the mention of Christian Grey leads immediately to Christian Grey. Nothing is black and white. There's no binaries. Everything is grey. There's so much more complexity and nuance in this entire situation. Even though back in 2013, he was quite willing to dismiss 50 Shades of Grey as being nothing more than mummy porn. I'm not going to sit on top of the laundry machine and spin cycle reading about putting a ball gag in someone's mouth. That doesn't do it for me.
What does it say that so many women love 50 Shades? Does it say that a lot of women secretly harbour the same kind of thoughts that you've been condemned for actually doing?
I mean, if the book sales represent that, I wouldn't be surprised.
What's the age range of women who actually liked 50 Shades of Grey? I think that would be really interesting data because I feel like the kinds of women who gravitated toward 50 Shades of Grey were typically the kinds of women who buy like the Barnes and Noble kind of books, which tend to be women who are older, like sort of in their late 30s, 40s, who are in long-term marriages and are looking for like a fantastical escape. It sort of feels like that kind of woman as opposed to sort of millennials, let alone 20-year-old woman. I'm not that convinced by this whole narrative. I think, yes, there was a particular category of women who were enchanted by this and who were fueling this whole thing. And obviously it became a huge thing. And I think because of them, it largely became far more mainstream and it hit the mainstream mainly because of social media and because of the film franchise. But I really do doubt that it was as popular among young women relative to the popularity of Twilight among those young women. And most of them thought Twilight was problematic and a bit weird. The primary target audience for the 50 Shades of Grey novel was women aged 35 and over. Most of these women discussed the novel's relationships and romance rather than its sexual context. Why am I not surprised? But anyway, this is all about Armie. This is about Armie. This is not about women. This is not about the woman involved. This isn't about women at all. This is all about a man trying to find his ego again.
I experienced a ego death, a career death, a financial death, all of these things, right? And Jung talks about this. Joseph Campbell talks about this. You got to die. And once you die, you can then be reborn. The phoenix. Exactly. A phoenix isn't going to rise if there's no ashes.
He is the epitome of that song from that Bratz movie.
You know it's all about me. You know it's all about me.
And I think it is so telling that Armie has been on Piers Morgan, on Bill Maher. This is the perfect time for him to make his comeback. Anti-Hollywood sentiment is ripe for the picking, as well as a growing, at least online, disdain and criticism for the #MeToo movement, especially in the face of his former co-star Johnny Depp being vindicated in the court of public opinion. This is so opportunistically obvious that I actually do have to commend him for this. Well done. Okay, so he was also on another podcast called the Painful Lessons podcast. It's basically hosted by his friend. Great when you have friends and connections, when you claim that you've been shunned by everybody and you don't have friends and connections. But hey, it's his narrative. It's his story.
When all of this really kind of started for me, it felt like I was in a tornado. It felt like the only thing I could do was cover my head and protect my neck. Even though I had instincts of lashing out, even though I wanted to go out there and be like, this is crazy. Like, what is everyone talking about? Like, there were things that people were saying about me that just felt so outlandish.
Cannibal.
Yeah, that I was a cannibal.
I am 100% a cannibal. I want to eat you. That's scary to admit, but I've never admitted that before. PR tip number 3. You didn't say anything. Everybody else was saying these things. Everybody else was making up all these stories about you. You didn't say that you were 100% a cannibal, that you're afraid to admit it. Everybody else did. To be fair, nobody actually thought that he was a cannibal. As I said before, this was all just mainly about the way that he went about actualizing these cannibalistic fetishizations that he clearly has. Maybe a small percentage. There are some people who sort of believe in like Illuminati conspiracies and the weird things that the rich and famous do. And so it's not unimaginable, I guess, for some people. I personally am in, I think, the majority of people who are quite certain that he's not actually a cannibal. But branding things into your partner, being clearly a top without caring about their protection and their well-being and their comfort is what people had an issue with. You were claiming to practice BDSM when clearly you were not. The main thing that you are responsible for as a top is to actually care for the well-being and the consent, both the physical as well as the emotional, as well as the enthusiastic consent, as well as the psychological consent of the person who you are engaged in relations with. Armie didn't do that because everything was and still clearly is about Armie.
Now I'm able to sort of look at it with a sense of distance and perspective and be like, that's hilarious. Like, people called me a cannibal and everyone believed them. They're like, yep, that guy ate people. And you're just like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Do you know what you have to do to be a cannibal? You have to eat people. Like, how am I going to be a cannibal? Like, it was bizarre.
Oh my God, everybody's crazy. I'm the only sane one here.
Whatever it was that people said, whatever it was that happened, I'm now at a place in my life where I'm grateful for every single bit of it. I'm actually now at a place where I'm really grateful for it.
This is what you would call shame-based gratitude. Basically, Armie's focusing on the perceived positives of being exposed as a serial cheater and emotional abuser, if not also an alleged physical abuser. Because this is how he can live with himself whilst not actually taking any accountability for what he's done. On the one hand, he can't deny what he's done in ending his career, but he's also clearly incapable of having an honest look at himself in the mirror. And so therefore, he's grateful. This is something that I see quite a lot in the, I would say, toxic positivity side of the mindfulness community. And so it's really no wonder to me why he's all about gratitude in his comeback. Gratitude journaling and going on your gratitude gratitude journey is all the rage right now. Spirituality and mindfulness are on the rise, and there are so many people who are going to lap this up and are going to enjoy this, and he knows it. And gratitude also has interesting religious connotations. It's oftentimes paired with and in relation to forgiveness, because he's grateful that this happened. He forgives himself for what has happened. He's clearly learned something, so you reciprocate by forgiving him.
But now, being not only removed from the initial chaos of it, but also having learned everything that I've learned as a result from it, I look at it now and I go, you know what, like, it was awful. And I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But for the people in my life that I truly love, I hope some version, preferably smaller than what I went through, would happen to them as well, so they could learn everything that I've learned.
He feels great about it now, and he hopes that the people closest to him can go through some of, not all of, and not to as great an extent of what he went through. And to get to that point, you have to do the things that he did and learn from that. But I think right now, what is just as interesting and entertaining about Armie Hammer's attempted comeback is his cosplaying as Paul. Armie has been telling the world that he's basically been cut off from his family's fortune and renown and is poor, basically. And this has been a running narrative of his since he yeeted himself out of acting in 2021 and subsequently checked into rehab. In 2022, there was even a flyer going around suggesting that he was so broke that he was working as a concierge in the Cayman Islands. Welcome to beautiful Grand Cayman! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I am your personal concierge and I'm here to help you get the very best from your vacation. Swim with the dolphins, deep sea fishing, turtle farm, Stingray City on Tuesday, 4-stop sunshine cruise, drinks included, 50% discount only with me, much more. Regards, Armie. Extension number 5937. I'm sorry, I just find this so funny because firstly, this is Armie Hammer living in the Cayman Islands. The only people who are like working respectable, proper jobs in the Cayman Islands are locals. Okay, let's be real. Foreigners are not there to actually work.
I mean, do you have much of an income at the moment or not?
Not very much. And it's
what is that like?
No, not very much. That is the exact answer that you'd expect from a foreigner who lives on the Cayman Islands. No, I don't earn very much. No.
For someone who had so much money and flashed it around so much and could squander it to your heart's content, what's it like to actually have very little money?
I don't know that you will believe me, and I'm pretty sure that they won't, but it's very liberating.
Guys, it is so liberating having no money. This reminds me of a little anecdote that I have, a little story from my life, which I always remember and just keep tabbed just because of how amusing it is. I was at the grocery store with a friend and they were looking at this really overpriced, very expensive olive oil. And they were looking at it and then they looked at me and they're like, you know what, Z? I either want to be really, really rich in life or really poor in life. I don't want to be anywhere in the middle because I can imagine that both are such an incredible adventure. You can tell how incredibly upper middle class this person was that they would say something.
It's very liberating.
And this is the thing. I think when upper class and upper middle class people think poverty, they think I'm going to have Spotify and not Spotify Premium anymore. Somebody saying that they're grateful for being broke is somebody who isn't actually broke. And I think in all of this, it's very telling that Armie lives on the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands is tax-free and has one of the highest standards of living, not just in the Caribbean, but in the whole world. And it also tops the ranking of the best money hideout, doing the best to help the world's richest hide and launder their money. So of course he's broke, just like pretty much every well-to-do foreigner on the Cayman Islands.
When you give up all of the things that you think define who you are or make you what you are, and you no longer have those things, it forces you to leave the external world and to go internal and to actually find out who you are and what you are. And money has very little to do with that.
Yeah, that's what somebody who eats 3 meals a day says, not somebody who's broke and poor. Now, this is all hilarious to me because the Hammer family and dynasty is loaded. And considering that Mommy's tell-all memoir has come out, which is defending him, I'm assuming that they are still on good terms and are still connected. Because when a rich person is shunned from the family fortune, it usually doesn't mean what I think a lot of people think it means. A perfect example, Prince Andrew. He's lost his annual allowance since 2022. And yet he lives here. Prince Charles has pulled his $3 million per annum protection. Oh, poor baby, who still lives in a mansion, who still gets his pension, who still has his friends, his connections, his extended family, who still has all of his assets, I'm quite sure. So last month, of course, in no way in relation to his PR tour, he put out a video declaring that he is so broke that he's had to sell his truck because he can't afford gas anymore. He's making a new start with a tiny hybrid, just like he used a tiny knife to carve his initials into a woman's body.
The tip of a small knife.
A knife.
Because this all symbolizes a new chapter in his life and career. Let's watch this poverty cosplay in action.
So I've been back in LA for a couple of weeks now. This is my truck. I bought this for myself in 2017 as a Christmas gift for myself.
This is why people sell their cars and their trucks. They're old, too many miles.
This is not an ad for CarMax. This is because I'm selling my truck. Since being back in LA, I have put about $400 or $500 worth of gas in it, and I can't afford it. I can't afford the gas anymore. I mean, this truck, like kids home from the hospital, all that stuff.
PR tip number 4, talk about your kids, because nobody can hate kids. Anybody who has anything negative to say about somebody who's talking about their kids, you're just haters, you're horrible people, you're insensitive. Very, very clever. I'll give him that. He's smart. I'll give him that. Mommy's PR team is on the ball with this one.
But you know what? That's okay. I got a new car. It's tiny. It's a hybrid. I'm probably going to put about $10 of gas in it a month.
Well, obviously it's a hybrid.
Amazing trips. Amazing trips.
I love how he intentionally decides to obfuscate the fact that a lot of these cross-country road trips actually involved him going on these long road trips and like holidays with girlfriends and with all of the women that he was involved with whilst he was still married. I can imagine that this is the exact truck that was implicated in many of his infidelities.
So I have to clean all of this stuff out.
Did you see that? Now, I don't know about you. Now, there's apparently a lot of stuff that he and not some car cleaner has to clean out from his car. And one such item, if you just pause the video, includes a rope that looks very much like shibari rope. Oh, this man is the gift that keeps on giving. You cannot deny the similarity between these ropes. Oh, tell me that wasn't there on purpose. Tell me that that was not an indirect jibe to all the women who accused him. There are people in this world right now who are canceling Blake Lively for being a quote-unquote mean girl, yet this is happening. He hasn't changed. He has not changed a bit.
It's my birthday tomorrow.
Oh my god, guys, it's his birthday. Oh my god, you have to forgive him now. It all connects. It's his birthday. He's selling his car. He's getting a new car. He's starting a new chapter in his life. He's getting rid of his shibari rope. He's a new man. He's poor. He's of the people. God, I'm shocked he isn't saying Wakanda forever at the end of this.
August 28th, I will be starting my birthday in a new car, in a new apartment, in a new life in Los Angeles.
We need an apartment tour because I'm sure that this is an apartment and not an apartment.
Thank you very much. You have gotten me a long way, and I appreciate it all. I hope that you take as good a care of the next person. Cool. Time to clean it all out. They gave me bags before I abandoned my baby.
I love how he's showing more love and affection toward his inanimate car than he is toward the 50 or 100 or maybe even 200 women who he had affairs with. The amount of comments under this of people basically insinuating that he is way too attractive to be poor is just astounding.
Fuck. I mean, I really do have so many great memories of road trips and camping trips and sleeping in this car.
Yeah, we know who he was on road trips with, who he was camping with, who he was sleeping with in that truck. But do let me know what you think. I don't know. I'm just not convinced. And please, really do let me know what you think. Are you convinced by this? Do you think that he is being genuine or authentic? Of course, I do not think that everything is black and white. I do not believe in binaries. I'm very much a Christian Grey myself. But there is something about this whole coming back that doesn't sit well with me. In all this spiel about gratitude and all the reflections on his spiritual journey, Armie Hammer has not once apologized or genuinely acknowledged the many women who he implicated in his lifestyle. Even though many of these women have come out to express the trauma and the post-traumatic stress disorder that he has caused them, he has yet to not only apologize for this, but to actually genuinely humanize the many victims he has left in his trail. I would expect a journey of genuine, authentic introspection to involve not just the acknowledgement, but the humanization of these women. In all the podcast appearances and interviews that he's given, he has not once done this. I also do think that it's interesting that he seems to play down the fact that he was cancelled to being either just about people accusing him of being a cannibal, or the fact that he was cancelled for doing something that so many other men and women do in Hollywood, cheating on their spouses. I actually think it is somewhat good that we are starting to call people out for infidelity, especially public figures and celebrities who have the world in their palm and who historically were allowed to get away with such behavior. But of course, contrary to what Armie believes, I do not think that this was about infidelity and him cheating on his wife. This was very much about the way in which he cheated on his wife. And although he seems, to me at least, clearly ready to romanticize his entire ordeal, or the entire ordeal that he rather caused a lot of other people,
A phoenix isn't going to rise if there's no ashes.
I am happy to see and hopeful that the internet will not romanticize alongside him. Who knows? I think we just have to wait for the biopic or the film or the screenplay or the book or the whatever about him and his life and his struggles and his ordeals that is inevitably going to come out in the next year or so. Good luck to him and his hybrid, I guess. Thank you so very much for watching this video. Let me know if you like these more relaxed videos. I'm trying to be a bit more or a bit less anal, so we'll see how that pans out. But anyway, thank you so much for your support as always, and don't forget to check out Beducated. I think it is a fantastic deal. Remember, it is 40% off your yearly pass, and I will see all of you very, very soon in the next one.